Welcome to the Behind the Art Inspiration Podcast, a sneak peek into the studio practices of all types of artists, conversations for collectors who love to listen to the banter and creative process of international artists. Today's host actually is Cheryl Barill. Cheryl herself is an artist and the founder and curator of the Curated Canvas. And Cheryl is actually interviewing me today, so it's quite a unique and fun thing for me. I'm very excited to hear how this goes because we really haven't practiced anything. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Cheryl.
Okay, well, this has been an absolute thrill to pull this together. This is something that I conspired to do with you at the onset of your interviewing. So I'm going to now officially and formally introduce you, Caroline Karp, for season 2, episode 14 of
The Behind.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's a mouthful.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you say it again.
The Behind the Art Inspiration Podcast. It kind of has a little bit of a, for me to have remembered it, a little bit of a lilt to it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is going to be a flyby kind of interview because my excitement's going to get in the way of some of my thinking. So
That's
I'll
okay.
apologize up front and just say, hey, I'm human, life happens. So also Caroline has a BFA and an MA, and she is a podcaster, an artist, and she also is really in an unofficial, official way, the founder of the International Online Art Collective. That whole initiative began at the beginning of lockdowns, and we were a group of artists who were already hanging out together online in another capacity. And I think Caroline was the first one who said out loud what many of us were thinking. So that's all it took, was hearing it out loud, and a bunch of other people, not me, kicked into action because life just got crazy. So in this process, we've all gotten to know each other really well. And I'm going to ask you, Caroline, is that when and where did you come up with the idea of this podcast series? Because that alone is a wonderful brainstorming thing that you put everything into. So take it from there, if you will.
So after, forming with a bunch of other artists, the International Online Art Collective, I wanted to take it a little bit further. That was forming that collective began a string of connection that I was really looking for during the pandemic, and being in my studio and having like the most creative outburst in my life. I wanted to share it with others. And I knew that there were other artists all over the world that were kind of experiencing the same thing. And so the impetus behind the podcast was to go into those studios, because when other time could we go into each other's studios, than Zoom or all the other live streaming. So I figured I would make it official. And I had a beautiful group of people to start with and to go play in their studios, which were the people of the Online Art Collective, right? And so I started by interviewing them. And then now I've been branching out and I interview all types of artists, musicians. I've even dabbled in like meeting people that are more spiritual in nature. So I guess when I'm out in the world or online, if I find somebody who's really interesting and I think that others will think are interesting, I say, hey, I have a podcast. Would you like to come on my podcast? And typically they say, sure. I think one of my funnest podcasts was when I was in Hawaii. And I was walking around in Honolulu and I looked down the street and I saw an artist, like a sign that said Infinite Arts. And I said, I have to go in there. And I walked in and fell in love with the artwork. And then I was like, hey, I'm a podcaster. Would you like to come on my podcast? And so that was my first in person where we were in the same studio.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. I've actually done a few like that now. where we're in the same physical place when I'm traveling.
I
So
would think that that would change the dynamic, because being in physical presence, as much as the gift of Zoom during this whole pandemic thing has been really an amazing gift. So it clamps down on isolation in a really wonderful way. And it's amazing how we adapt to, different methods of connecting, because we are people, creatures that need to connect. So how different was that for you to like finally be like in physical space with somebody while interviewing them? That
I
must have
think,
been amazing.
yeah, the energy changed.
Yeah.
I could feel the energy. This is actually my second time, I think, being interviewed by somebody else. And the first time I was up in DC,
Mm,
right? So I was in DC at Teresa Elliott's home. She's a photographer,
mm.
and she had actually been following me around DC, photographing me. And then we ended up at her house, which is this amazing, it's a gorgeous house. And she said, "Hey, I want to interview you." And the house was just so beautiful. She had these two white chairs that were perfectly set. It was just a really pretty set to be
Nice.
doing an interview in. And so I should probably show that one again, but that was my first time being interviewed.
Nice. I remember seeing some of those photos, and she did do a beautiful job. Are those photos still up publicly where people can see them on
They're on
one of their social
Facebook.
media?
Yeah, you can look up. I actually use them in some of my, like on my website and other social media things. Yeah, but yeah, they're sprinkled in there.
Okay, so it was when I saw those photos that I started thinking, like, darn, as an artist who's been like stuck in the studio, it's like I'm seeing you like out there in the world, and it's like all of a sudden you've got this studio in DC, and you've got the studio connection in Hawaii, and you're still in Florida. So my mind is trying to wrap together. It's like, whoa, like this is really totally the artist's dream.
Right.
So I'd love to hear about that. Like, how was that for you as an artist? And then what were some of the circumstances that set that in motion for you? Because I
Right.
think it's just so amazing that you've got all this going.
Right. So at heart, I'm a performance artist. So I've been doing this all along. Um, excuse me. In fact, every summer, or actually 4 times a year, I would travel to Asheville, to North Carolina. So right now, I haven't been back since the pandemic, but um, I started going there and setting up studios and painting there, and even doing retreats. So I've
Mhm.
always kind of traveled, and then wherever I travel, set up a place and paint. Right. But in those circumstances, I would pack up my stuff when I left. I couldn't like set roots down
Mhm.
like I had in Kauai and in DC. So the DC connection is I started painting there probably 6 years ago. And
Ah,
when I dropped Sebastian off at Georgetown University, uh,
well, Sebastian is your
it's my
son.
younger son.
Okay.
I fell in love with the neighborhood of Georgetown and would stay there and I ended up going up there 4 times a year, to where I just left an easel and canvas and paints, and just and became kind of infused in the neighborhood, to where I can go there and be recognized. And I have collectors, and I have done live painting events, and I'm thinking of joining the Georgetown Main Street Board. So I've become part of the community, I guess.
Mhm.
And uh, I go up there regularly. So
Nice.
that also links into being a plein air artist. So I know how to pack a backpack full of paints. The canvas can be as big as that. I don't care. I'll find somebody to carry it for me, or I can carry it myself. I have an easel that collapses.
Mhm.
So my studio is truly wherever I am, right? So now both of my boys live there. They're
Nice.
roommates. They have an
Nice.
amazing place, and I can jump on an airplane and end up painting in a couple hours. It's a couple hour flight.
Wow.
So that's how that happened.
Wow. And
The-
Georgetown is such a quaint city. It's so beautiful there. So as a plein air artist, just to be inspired by just the whole feeling and the how the place feels. And you mentioned briefly something about spiritual connection, and I know that that's not a brief, by the way, mention for you. So, so from Georgetown, from Florida to Georgetown, and swooping over to Hawaii, the energetic shift there. I know when I stood on the rock cliffs of Hawaii, I felt some of the most profound energy. It's my dream to return there and plein air paint as well. So when I saw you were like, dang, she's living my dream. And I just wanted to connect with you on that because the energy of that is so amazing. So if you don't mind, we're just now flying you straight over the country and landing you back in Hawaii. And what is that like for you as an artist? I mean,
Sure.
and then how do you manage all the particulars? Because that's not an easy thing either.
Well, when I went there first, it was to learn about, okay, I'm going here. Did I have any? I don't think I had any paints with me. I'm going to find out. Oh, I did a lot of research first. Where am I
Mm.
going to find? Where's the art store? Like, where's the art
Right.
store in Kauai? It's interesting there. Um, I found out that the Ace Hardware has an art store inside of it called Ben Franklin. So that's where I bought my first paints in Kauai. I bought an easel. No, I already had an easel there because where I stay is at my cousin's house. So my cousin has a beautiful house in Lauai, Kauai, on a mountain where
Mm.
the lanai, I'm going to say all these I words. So
Yeah.
Hawaii, Kauai, lanai, Lauai. On her lanai, when you look out, you can see the ocean far off in
Mm.
the distance. And in the middle is like mountains, and they're just lush green and so different than the city in Georgetown, right?
For sure. Right.
Or even here
Okay.
in
So
Florida.
when I was in Kona in a similar setting, I was my first morning woken up by roosters in the
Roosters.
trees. So do you have that there too on that
Oh
island?
yeah.
Because I was on a different island. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's very different than Georgetown.
Right. So you're right. There's roosters. There's no air conditioning, or she doesn't have air conditioning. So it's very interesting because, especially moving closer to the winter, the trade winds
Mm.
really blow. So that's another experience. It almost feels like the house is gonna lift up off the mountain, right? Because it just rushes through. It's kind of very unique. But anyway, so right outside of my bedroom, that's where I set up my studio on the lanai. So anywhere I go, I have this thing of spatially being able to set up my space.
Hmm.
And my cousin Ann already had an easel for me there.
Oh,
And
nice.
we had a way to block the wind. It was all right. It was really, I don't even know she knew she was doing this, but uh, there was a way to block the wind so that when I was painting outside, it wouldn't blow everything over, right? So, and I just first started painting right there on the lanai and started noticing beautiful, I would call them vistas, right? Like beautiful places that just captured my eye.
Right. In your
And
heart.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Lauai is actually a very spiritual place,
Mhm.
very close to her home. There's um there's a place you can go to. It's the international some I don't I'm not going to remember the name, but what they you go there and you climb up a mountain, right? That has these little temple
Mhm.
that you can artists, there's a Buddha inside made by all different kinds of artists. Some are ancient, like some are really old, but then there are some new ones. And people can put messages to their loved ones in each temple, and there's like 108 of them as
Wow.
you climb up the mountain. And it
Wow.
ends up with a nice, beautiful temple. And it's just right in that same area. So the area is very sacred there. And if you ever been to Kauai, it's once you've been to Kauai, you know all of Kauai. One would think there's one road, but there's really not. But basically, you go from the southern end of the island to the northern end, and you can only get to this part of the island on, I guess that would be the west, if you're on a boat,
Oh.
right? Because that's the Nepali coastline where there's sheer, tall cliffs and
Oh.
those cathedral type mountains.
Wow.
And so I love painting in Kauai, and I have a couple of collectors in Kauai. But then when I get back to my home studio of Tampa, I'm still painting Kauai a little bit. And those are more of the imaginative dream mixed media type pieces.
Artwork. We haven't even talked about your artwork yet. Oh my gosh. So yeah, you work in mixed media and process. And when you interviewed me, we talked a little bit about what process was, maybe at too much of a length, but where you start out with one idea and you continue building it layer upon layer. So, what are some of the layers that you're working with these days? I'm guessing it shifts and changes as the
Right.
motivation inside you expands, because that's what that does. So, tell us a
Right.
little bit about
So
that.
I'm an oil painter first.
Mm, mhm.
I'm an acrylic painter and mixed media. And sometimes the three merge. What's on my easel right now is a process piece which has many layers. And I think that's where you were referring to. And it also has changed. It also has changed quite a bit
Mhm.
because at the beginning, it was simply, in fact, let me grab it and I think I can put it right behind me.
Ah,
Why don't you talk while I go grab it?
okay. When I first started becoming aware of your work, I was seeing you work in layers that I've not seen before. And for people who are not experienced in certain multimedias, they have to know that archivally, if you're going to use acrylic and oil, the acrylic has to be the first layer and the oil has to be the final layer. So the other materials that you're working with for mixed media, I'm assuming, I don't know, are you embedding it, adhering it to the acrylic part, or are you embedding it into the oil and then building more layers to seal that in so it is solid?
Actually, I'm a purist. So when I'm doing an oil painting, it's just an oil painting.
Ah, okay.
And when I'm doing an acrylic, that the acrylics are where I play because, like you said, you cannot mix the oil. Like it's too technical, and it could peel. Like so, this is
If it's not
all
done right, yeah.
it's all acrylic based.
Okay.
So this one is called, and it's kind of hard to see because there's a glare over there, which I could probably turn off. Let me turn off that
Well, I
glare.
can see that water. I see the boats.
Right. So this one, I think that'll fix it. This one is a piece that I started probably I don't know, 2018, and it's just changed so many times. It was Tampa Bay based at the beginning, and
Mm,
that's me. This is a self portrait. This is Aria.
I remember that part. Okay, and the rest of it did change.
Yeah, so that used to be a bay. That used to be Tampa Bay. the sailboats changed. I added this person. He's standing on like the lava rocks of Hawaii now, right? And back in the background, those are the mountains that if you've ever been to Hanalei Bay, you would kind of recognize those are those mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And in Hanalei Bay, there are sailboats, just like hooked up on a mooring, just like out there floating.
Okay.
Now, as you can see, I'm painting that scene. And that scene was always there, but I added the black mountains at the top, and I'm going to leave it like that, I think. But anyways, the process was when I added those mountains, I did that with the black torn tissue paper.
Okay.
So they went up there very quickly. It just one tear and just a few tears, and then the green that you see on there are these they're water-based pastels.
Oh.
So you can put them on there. I like to dip my finger in water and play with it because they're water soluble.
Nice.
And when it's all finished, I seal it with a varnish, so nothing moves anymore.
Okay.
Right. So this one is called Dreaming of Hanalei. It's actually called, I'm going to change that because I did name it Dreaming of Kauai, but I probably will name it Dreaming of Hanalei. So when I get back here, I play a little bit more because I've got more of my materials.
Sure, because you're in your full studio at that point.
Yeah, I'm going to bring another one over.
And then the intuitive process too is, so like when I go out and about and I take in visually and all my senses are alive, and that's the point of plein air painting. And then once you're finished with those sessions, all those emotions and the feelings of the place definitely keep bouncing around and resonating inside. So then to come into the studio and start the intuitive process, that to me, that is like the perfect complement to plein air painting. So that's really what you're describing, I think. Tell me if I'm saying it right for you. I know it's different for everybody.
Yeah, so this one is another process painting. I started it, oh my gosh, during the pandemic, before I went to Hawaii. It did not look like this. I haven't made a video of it yet, but when I make a video, you'll be surprised because this was actually a person. It was me sitting like this. And when I was in Hawaii at this location and I saw that mountain, this is Hyena Beach, sort of at the end of the road I was talking about at the top of the island, North Shore. I looked at that mountain and I said, that's me. I'm going to paint that mountain. And the tip up there is where my fingers are. And my body ended at the bottom of this lifeguard stand. Right. And when you see this in person, I still left some of it there. There's writing all underneath this, and also circles of life. So this whole bottom section, which is painted over, but you can still see, you can see it in person. You can't, I don't think you can see it here. When I post it, you'll be able to see the words under, lightly the words. So all of this is all washes, like on top are washes of color to build this up.
So when you're up close, you see all those little nooks and crannies. And I'm always saying that, photography and film and everything like that never does a painting justice. So it leads me just as a reminder to whoever is watching or listening to this to, always make sure to go see art live whenever you can. And do you do open studio tours? How do you handle, especially now with pandemic? It's especially, it's like, it's safe, it's not safe. How are you managing that? Do you do open studio tours or so people can come and see?
Yeah. So what I do is I set up by appointment only, and it's usually 1 or 2 people, maybe 3. If it's going to be more than that, I find an outdoor kind of space or a place that I can bring my work to. Right now, I have my work up at City Hall in Safety Harbor.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's sort of a public space that's going to be permanent through December that people can see artwork. But normally I have people contact me and want to see the work. And then I make sure they're, that they're truly interested. And then I invite them to see it.
Nice. And it's
That
always fun to see the reaction in person too. Again, that like interpersonal exchange, because you put so much of yourself into your work. You want to be able to share that moment when somebody's looking at it and experiencing it. It's more than looking, it's experiencing it.
right.
Yeah.
And this piece in particular is actually both of the ones we just talked about are really fascinating with what's happening in them. And not all my work takes on different flavors. When I'm in Georgetown,
Mm.
I'm painting the historic buildings that are there, and they're so colorful and there's so much great energy. And that's what you find in the Georgetown paintings. The Kauai paintings, I'm a plein air artist, right? I'm painting scenes that I'm seeing, and I would say that those are my romantic expressionist paintings of being in the moment and creating. I would say my Tampa Bay paintings they stay up on my easel a little bit longer. I have time to go back and play with them. My entire sailboat series, except for the ones I've sold, are here. The ones that you probably are the most familiar with, because that was during the pandemic when we were all together on Zoom and
Mhm.
really intently following each other. So I would say that I'm just now doing what I've always been doing. I'm just more vocal about doing it
Nice.
because we have Zoom and we have a new capability that artists didn't really pay attention to before the pandemic, right?
Right. 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 I know like yeah, the whole thing about, so many people were so worried because traditionally whether we're represented by a gallery or doing a pop-up or other live events like you do, performance art, which is a whole different thing and must be, I've never done like that. Accidentally when I'm plein air painting, I guess you're a performance artist in a
Yes.
way. Um, but um, Zoom has opened up so many other opportunities, and the international initiative realizing, you know, in so many different ways, just globally, about borders and boundaries are man-made. And, the creative process is endless. So when we take our creative process about, our artwork and then apply it to our lives, I think that's where magic is found.
Yeah.
And your podcast series, I think, is a piece of that magic. So I'm thrilled and delighted to turn the tables and get to interview you on this. Um, as we're continuing on or drawing to an end, I'm wondering, is there a question that I haven't asked you that you're like, darn, I wish you had asked me that? And then what would that be?
Huh. I don't know. Other than under these two paintings
I just thought of that. Yeah.
is a piece that I'm on layer number 37. So keep talking while I move these two because I want to talk about that a minute. That's
Layer number 37. Okay, so what I thought of the words. I know there was one time you did a social media post. I happened to see it, and you asked for people to contribute words. You were looking for, I thought, like words to lay as the foundation underneath the painting to help you increase and anchor a certain energy maybe that you were looking for,
yes.
or
So what you're talking about is my painting called A Sign of Hope.
Mm.
A Sign of Hope now lives with one of my collectors up in DC. She's actually from Rockville, Maryland, but I just say DC because it's that area. Um,
Nice.
she purchased the piece, I don't know, a few weeks ago, right? It's one of my
Oh,
favorite pieces, but
I love that piece.
I know
She's fortunate.
she is. She knew what she knew what she was doing. Um, Up in the Sky. So that was like my pandemic piece, and it's all about connection. And at first, I was writing about the numbers. All we heard were numbers.
Right.
I remember writing the numbers and being like, I had to listen to it 4 times before I got the number correct, and then I would write it up in the sky. But then what I wanted to do was I put out something that said, "Tell me what your sign of hope is." I think is what it was. Did you participate in that?
I did, and I'm trying to remember what word was it that resonated so deeply with me. And when you added it, I was just like, I can't even, I mean, like, I'm a very spiritual person as well. And the energetic component of what's us and beyond us and through us and we're part of, and that overlap of energy is very important component in my work. And I felt that when you did that piece very strongly. And
Yeah,
I don't remember the word, but I
that's okay.
remember, um, and I'm like getting all chills down my back, even remembering it. Just just that you took my word and integrated it into your work. It
Right.
felt like it became legacy.
Right. So people around the world, I was writing their things up in the sky. And you know
Yeah.
what's so interesting is my collector, her name is Jennifer, her job, and I'm going to get this wrong, but her job is developing medication of some kind, and I'm butchering this, I know, to help people who have gotten COVID. That's the crazy part of the whole thing, because that's what
Wow.
the piece is about. Because there's like, this is not the painting, it's kind of similar though. But the buildings I painted, I put a glaze of gold over them to protect the people living in Manhattan at the time, right? That was when it was really scary, scary stuff there in Manhattan. There's so much to talk about that painting, but just that what her job is. And she also, the comfort is in the foreground, the USS, wait,
The
United
ships that
States,
came in
yeah,
for
the
hospital relief. Yeah.
hospital boat, yeah,
Yeah.
is in the foreground, and she knows people that worked on that boat or that on the
Wow.
ship or that were part of that. Anyways, so
Wow.
yeah, that was another process piece with many layers that stayed on my easel almost 2 years, with me adding more words up, and it looks like Starry Night, just the way that they're written
Mhm.
and swirling. And this painting behind me here is similar. Um, there were words up there that you can still kind of see the words. It used to say, "How does it feel to be real?" Right? When you take all the masks off and you're just authentic in who you are, and you're letting the world see just the authentic you without all the masks. How does it feel to be real? So that was going through the sky. You can still sort of see it up on the building, right? And like I said, it's layer number 37. I was going to go up to 50 layers. I don't know. I kind of like it like this. But you never
I think
know.
I think we know when a piece is finished.
Yeah,
It's like when you've said everything you have to say, and they're just like you look at it, and there's nothing that would make it more fulfilled or fulfilling.
right. And
So,
over here in this little square, I kept it for many of the layers, so it didn't change.
mm,
And there's a rock on there, and it talks about true north. What is your true north? So, some people buy paintings and they just want to look at it and have their own interpretation. And then some collectors like to hear the story behind the artwork.
right. Right.
Jennifer's one of those collectors. She really gets into the story of the artwork.
Well, especially that particular painting you're talking about must have been really personal and very powerful to her. I have a nephew who lives in New York, and he was he was traveling quite a bit, and he got it early on,
Oh,
and very frightening, very very frightening, and just the tone in the whole city. So when those hospital ships came in, those were beacons of hope,
yes.
of like getting control of this absolute chaos. And that was also before it was really understood, how is it transmissible. So like, is our food safe, et cetera, and
Oh,
can you
yeah.
touch stuff, and it was pretty crazy. So a lot of artists, I think they, a lot of the pandemic art was that I've seen, um, really wanted to touch on the fear component or the isolation component. And and I didn't do any of that either. My work is all about hope and like, um, rising up, and integrating, like I said before, energy with energy. And so I did not go down that rabbit hole of despair and isolation and the pain and the suffering and the fear. And when I saw you do that painting, and that it was so clearly about hope, and your symbols that you chose, and how you did it, I just thought was absolutely powerful. So symbols, I mean, you use a lot of words,
Yeah.
and your layers are also become part of your symbols. So
Yes.
very cool stuff.
Yeah. And then, so in that sign of hope piece, my son Nikolai was living in Manhattan at the time.
Mm,
So that, when you're a mom and you're like, whoa, you need to get out of there, that kind of situation happening.
right, right.
In the foreground of the painting was a sailboat, and sailboats are sailboats for me are a symbol of freedom. So many other things also. Sailboats, I see them as, or I can equate them as the souls of people. Like they've just taken so much meaning on for me. But anyways, I painted a sailboat with him and his roommate on it
Mm,
for them to get out of there. Like, and
yeah.
it's good. You can tell they're sailing off the painting, right? Um, so sometimes you don't even know that you're painting a symbol, but when it keeps repeating in your artwork, you have to think to yourself, what does this mean for me? Or maybe you just keep painting it. But I think a lot of artists do that.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
Well,
have,
I've always said, our everything we do, whether it's actual portrait or landscape or uh, abstract or whatever, it's always a self-portrait, because we can't escape ourselves. So everything that we interpret is through the lens and the filter and our life experience and our creative process. So sometimes it's color. I go through cycles with color. Um, and I think many artists do. Excuse me. So yeah, some symbols can be color or shapes or a particular item. Yeah,
yes, something that's repeated, um, that makes a work a series.
yeah, and identifiable as that artist's work.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Well, is there anything I've been admiring your artwork behind you.
oh, so I started her. First of all, that is from a photographer who gave me permission to use his photo.
Mhm.
He's a traveler around the world, and the pandemic could not have been easy for him. His name is Doug Adams, and he can be found on Instagram is where I found him, and he's on other social medias as well. So I reached out to him. His work just absolutely moves me deeply, because he really captures the essence of the person, and he he gets he was like living with different tribes throughout Africa and becoming known to them. So they felt safe, the people felt safe around him, and would come seeking to have their photos done. So I have a couple of his photos that he gave me permission to use. This is one of them.
Nice.
And he works against a black backdrop when he does these close profiles, close-ups. And so the rest of that is all intuitive to me.
Nice.
So the headdress of the lilacs and the leaves, as you go through pierced ears, and the face mask, it's all clay and other earth products. So that part is from the photo. So it's and the rest of it is all intuitive.
Nice.
So and I use those intuitive sections also to like the feeling that I get, like the same as like when we're plein air painting, we are translating the experience of all of our emotions and our senses into the visual of the painting. So the visual of the painting here is like I get very intimately involved with the figure, and usually dancers. I have a dancers series, and I have a mask series. And my mask that I started to do during pandemic were beautiful masks. They were masks of pride or masks of celebration. So she's one of those. And she's been hanging out with me in the studio for a while. And now it's time for her to be finished. And I think I have a wall at a gallery that's going to put her up for a while. So hopefully there'll be some posts about that in the next couple months.
Nice. So I want to say goodbye to everyone here. Don't go anywhere, but I want to thank everybody, and thank you so much for interviewing me. I think you did a wonderful job, and I got to say so many things.
Great. So the interviewer behind the interviews. It's about time we get to know you a little more.
I know.
Yeah. Love your artwork. Love your energy and everything you're doing. So thank you for this opportunity to turn the tables.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And if people are enjoying interviews like this, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and Spotify once it comes out on Spotify. So the one thing people don't know is that first time that this gets released, it's a video, so you can kind of see the artwork. And then the second time it comes out, it's an audio on Spotify and Apple and all the other ones that are involved. And I want to thank everybody for being here. And I'm going to close this one out, and don't go anywhere, Cheryl.
Okay.